Hi everyone. Today I'm going to be talking about some frequently suggested ways to easily and quickly bulk up your NaNoWriMo word count. If you don't know, NaNoWriMo is every November National Novel Writing Month, and the objective is to write at least 50,000 words. I believed falsely at first it has to be a novel complete at only 50K. You can actually add to a work already in progress, or you can add like a bare minimum of 50K and just keep writing if the book isn't finished at that point. And there's also like various ways to be a nano rebel, but anyway, the bare minimum objective is to write 50,000 words. And many people doing the challenge, they don't have a lot of practice writing that many words in a short time or even at all. And so a lot of people think they're being helpful when they suggest ways to quickly bulk up the count. But a lot of these ways, I mean, there are like sometimes these things can be like very useful, or maybe you can do a little bit of them in moderation. But many of these other tips, they're just like building lazy writing habits, particularly if you get into them, because obviously when NaNoWriMo is over, you're going to have to edit out all this like garbage you put into your work in progress just so you could like bulk up to the 50,000 words in time. So I'm going to like basically talk about these so-called tips and why you want to avoid pretty much all of them, like either during Nano in particular or all year round in general. And so like one of them I was actually starting to get into this a bit last year, unfortunately, but I just realized I don't write this way naturally. I can't keep it up, is not using any contractions. Like, so for example, you would say I am doing, she would do this, and it's like just like read back an entire sentence or a paragraph or a chapter without any single contraction, and it sounds so like goofy and stilted and dated. It just it's like I had to, when I copied and pasted from the nano file back into the separate chapter files or the master file for the whole document in general, I would like have to take the non-contractions and put them into contractions, because it just looks gross like looking at them, because that's not how I write. And when I do look back at like really old reviews I wrote for Amazon like 10-15 years ago, or for my old blog posts for my old Angel Fire website, there's, I mean, like I was like, what was I thinking? There is almost no contractions there, and as well as like drafts of books I was writing around that same time. Like, why and when and where did I get the idea like contractions are bad and you should always do very, very formal writing? Because normal people don't talk that way at all, unless the point is to show like a particular character is very, very formal and like just does not use contractions as a natural part of his or her speech. Or maybe you're just trying to show a character is just learning English and so isn't down with all the slang yet and doesn't really know or use contractions, or might think that they're, too informal speech. So like, yeah, if you're doing it for dramatic effect or something, or deliberate character development, but other than that, like, why would you not use contractions? It's just such a pet peeve of mine. Now these are going to be basically like two faces of the same coin. One is not proofreading at all. Like, obviously the objective is to just keep writing and writing instead of getting mired down and like overthinking and being too much in your own head and doing all this editing as you write, instead of just like bang bang bang, like one word after the other. But you can at least like look over to see like, oh, I made a really embarrassing error. Like, for example, there is at least two instances in one of my works in progress which I worked on during several past nanos. I wrote claw chowder, and I obviously meant clam chowder. And seriously, or you write the wrong word. Like, I wrote like, ruin and ruin twice, and the first usage of that word was like, run. And so like, seriously, just like look over your work so you don't make embarrassing typos, because that'll just create like way more work for you when you're like actually editing through it later. So just like basically like look over it lightly, just to make sure. Not obviously not getting too much into editing. And the other flip side is like editing, rewriting, particularly constantly as you go along. Like for example, I got into this habit, unfortunately, like as I've explained in many prior blog posts and a few videos. I somehow got locked into permanent editor mode. So I was just like, constantly writing and rewriting the same line or paragraph, or just, oh, this is cluttery junk and I need to take it out, or maybe that would work better in a different book. And so just, thinking like this and that. And so basically I would leave this is the master nano word count file. If you don't know about this already, I always do this. I highly recommend it. You do one like file for your nano word count, particularly if you're a nano rebel like I am, and you're also counting creative nonfiction like blog posts, or like maybe like journal entries or poetry or something, in addition to the main fiction project, obviously you want them easily together in one master document, as well as that like copy and pasting that into the separate chapter files of the book which the project belongs to. And so I would, in the master file, I would leave, like several versions of the same line, a paragraph, phrasing in the middle of that, like abandoned scenes, like material best moved to another book. And that also creates a problem, because when I wasn't doing any proofreading at all, I would just like blindly copy and paste it all back into the chapter Word file. And then when you're looking back a year or so, however long it takes you to start editing it or getting back to that project after a hiatus, you're looking, oh, this creates way too much work for me. Like, what did I mean? What did I really want to leave in, leave out? This looks, like ugly, unprofessional. I'm better than this. So just, it's a really bad habit. Just like, if you have to edit, like do it after you finish with NaNo, or don't just like be so in your own head. You're constantly writing and rewriting and like leaving whole, like, like 10 different versions of the same line in the book, or abandoning a paragraph or a line midway through. So that's just, like a really bad habit to get into. Now, this is something which I have done on several projects in the past, but I've realized this is just really another bad habit to get into: writing out of order when writer's block strikes, or when a difficult patch arises. Like, for example, I'm reaching a really research heavy part of the book, and and it's not something I know by like the back of my hand. I write historical fiction, if you didn't already know, or you're just like writing about something you're not familiar with. Like, for example, characters are visiting a museum and you have to go down a whole research rabbit hole, or they're like visiting another city or something, like, or just anything that requires more research than you already know about, like, fluently. And so you have to like start, oh, I don't want to do this, and this is going to bog me down during NaNo, so I'm just going to like skip ahead 10 chapters or whatever. Oh, it would be fun. I would love to work on like the Halloween or the Christmas or the Thanksgiving chapter or part of the book, instead of like this like boring part early on, or just a part that's not, like you won't be writing as like quickly and easily as you would like something fun like a holiday or a birthday or a summer vacation chapter or whatever. And I mean, that can work sometimes, particularly if you're struggling, but it also creates big, gaps in the narrative and your own knowledge of the story. Like, I'm sorry, I'm saying like too much. If you, let's say you jump ahead like 50, 100 pages or whatever, you jump ahead like, 15, 20 chapters, and there's a lot of things that happen between the part early on when you left off and the part you jumped to. And so that, like, for example, important things might have happened in that, all that between material, then you're not constantly aware of it. Let's say, for example, a character got together with someone. This is a long awaited relationship and you've been building up to it for several previous books in the series, and then and you're like forgetting these people are together when you jump ahead, or maybe there are other things that happened along the way that you missed, and that's just creates a lot of continuity errors, like knowing or unknowing, or maybe some things are happening in the new material out of order you're writing that would contradict things you had actually planned to happen earlier on, or things that happened earlier in the completed material you've already forgotten about. So that's just a really not a good habit to get into, even though sometimes it can be necessary. Another bad habit is writing garbage and clutter just to fill up space. I know I have been very guilty of this at the very last moment at a number of prio nanos, particularly when you like have the like time and date thing pulled up so you can see how many seconds are left in the minute. I'm just like typing and typing and typing frantically to just cram in as many words as I can within the last 10, 5, 1 minute, like 30 seconds remaining of NaNo, and like pump it into the NaNo word count thing on the website. And obviously, of course, when you like finish it, midnight strikes, finally relief, you get to decompress, you immediately have to edit out pretty much everything you wrote, or just radically rewrite it, because you knew you were just writing like garbage and clutter for the mere sake of it. Or sometimes many people also just, oh, I'm just going to write fluff or garbage or clutter just along the way, just because I have to fill up space, instead of realizing I should focus on making every word count, instead of just madly writing as many words as possible just so I can get the words. Sometimes you need that experience of failing or almost failing to realize, wow, I really fluffed up. I need to like rethink my writing strategy and my winning NaNo strategy, and come back next year like much better, because you need to be humbled sometimes. I barely crawled across the finish line at 10 minutes to midnight in 2021. That I really needed that experience of like almost failing and like falling so far behind. I'll put up some screenshots of my two absolute best nanos and my worst NaNo and the like I guess the second worst NaNo when I was, like falling a little bit behind and barely keeping even. So that just like it emphasizes, like what I know I am absolutely capable of at the top of my power. So like, even when I have overachieved, I always feel, oh, I really could have done so much better if only I had spent more hours every day writing instead of being distracted by this and that. Oh, maybe I could have gotten to like, 200,000 words every month or just this and that. And then this to show the lows of what I knew I was not capable of, but I really did, need that experience to feel like humiliated and embarrassed. This is not my best work. I know I can do so much better than this. And also you can look back and realize, wow, I'm doing so much better than I did before. I really needed that learning experience. And sometimes also it's okay to fail. I mean, I personally would feel humiliated if I did fail, if I like got to midnight at 49,999 words and I couldn't even get the last like one word remaining to make 50K. But like other people say, like I needed that learning experience. It's okay to fail. My life was just too cluttered up or whatever. There was this and that happening, and it's okay to not always make 50K as long as you got however many words you did during that month. It's always like a learning experience and it's making good words. I'm sorry if I'm rambling, but it's just like sometimes you need to give yourself permission to fail, whether or not you actually fail or not. And then when you give yourself that permission, you succeed beyond your wildest dreams. And that actually happened to me in 2017 when I was a NaNo rebel for the very first time. And it really, really gave me back my writing mojo and motivation. And speaking of being a rebel, like another thing that's not really a good habit to get into is counting every word you write during the month, even on things that are not your declared project and the secondary creative nonfiction. Like for me, it's blog posts and journal entries. There have been times in the past, both during NaNo, the main NaNo month in November, and the camp months in April and July, as well as NaNoWriMo, which is not affiliated with NaNo, but it's very similar, and you like count your words at your own pace. It's the honor system. They just give you like a spreadsheet to like plug in your word count every day. Like I would count words written on like Instagram posts and like long YouTube comments to people, or like my own YouTube descriptions, or just like other things that had nothing to do with the actual like intended like declared like secondary purpose of being a rebel. So that's kind of lazy, and it also just revealed like how far I was falling and struggling in my writing. If I felt like, oh, I can't make it unless I count almost every single word I write, like even if it's like nothing to do with what I was like really it's supposed to write. And that's really just a bad habit, and it made me look bad, and also made me realize I need to regroup and like build up my strength so I can like become a better writer. And actually hopefully one day I will be writing like 100% for my declared NaNo project. I will not need to like fall back and rely on like creative nonfiction as a secondary thing, just in case I don't get to at least 50,000 in the declared main project. Now these are the things which are like the ultimate and lazy, and just like you're going to edit this out hopefully when you get to the editing process after NaNo is over. And if you really feel like you have to do this and rely on these like so-called like tips and tricks to quickly bulk out the word count, you need to go back to the drawing board and actually learn how to write and plot and prep much, much better. If you think, oh, I have to do this, or this is a good thing to do, because like who's going to say you're not going to ditch that habit when it's not NaNo? Maybe you can get unfortunately locked into that like bad habit and just rely on it too much. Like for example, constantly using way too many adjectives and descriptions. That's just like Victorian purple prose stuff. Like why do we need these? Like, oh, I'm describing this and I'm using like 500 words to describe like somebody's bedroom or a rose garden, and then that has absolutely nothing to do with the main like story or character development or world building or anything. It's just, oh, look at me, I can quickly fill up space by writing like garbage that I know I'm just going to edit out later. And just like dream sequences, that's many people advise against that. I mean, obviously it's not that you can never have a dream sequence, but when you're constantly relying on it and doing it so often, that's like what it calls into question whether it's really necessary to the story or the character development or anything, or if you're just using it to quickly fill up space, or constantly explaining basic things over and over again, either in dialogue or in the narrative. Like, are we supposed to think all of your characters, they have like no brain cells, and they instantly forget everything, like, oh, this is how this computer works, and this is how this works, and oh, I know I just explained this to you like an hour ago when you came to school, but oh, I have to explain it all over again, and I'm going to explain this and that and all these 500 things every single day, and oh, look, now I have 50,000 words because I was constantly like explaining and over explaining everything to every single character like a moron. Like, just seriously, like, think about, like that's just bad writing. I just, why would anybody actually like suggest that, or take that advice? And this is obviously plagiarism as well in many cases, not just laziness. You're writing out or copy and pasting like entire songs, poems, like book passages, like Bible quotes, just any other quote, things like that. That's again laziness, and that's not even your own words, so that shouldn't really count. I mean, obviously sometimes it does happen in a book, someone is like, for a real reason that goes along with like the story or the character development, like let's say there's a poetry reciting contest, or a certain poet or author is very important or special to a character, so they're always like quoting this person, or they're like writing an essay and they're including a quote in there. Like, it's, for example, one of my chapters in last year's NaNo project featured President Roosevelt's third inauguration in 1940. The characters are listening to it over the loudspeaker on a radio in the school auditorium, because the principal thinks it's so important for them to learn about this and like witness it second, or hear it secondhand, because he's so like politically involved and stuff. And it does like talk about how President Roosevelt always swore his oath of office on a family Bible written in 1686, and it was in Dutch language, and it was open to 1 Corinthians 13, and I did like write out all the like 12 or so lines of that Bible passage. But that wasn't just like laziness or just filling up space quickly. It was because it was actually important to the historical event being depicted, and the just like the setting the scene. So yes, sometimes you can get away with like a longer copy and paste or quote, things like that, but again, you should not like rely on that too much, because it just breeds like lazy writing habits. Another thing I can't believe anyone would actually like seriously suggest or do is always calling characters by their full names, like John, Thomas, William, Robert, like James, Harold, Timothy, Theodore, like Jingleheimer Smith the second, or something silly like that. That's just you're gonna cut that out. And like, who actually calls anybody by their full name all the damn time? It's like, okay, maybe like the middle name if that person is in trouble, or like if they're calling roll at school or something and they use the full name. But just like, seriously, that's, why would you do that? It just looks stupid and goofy and lazy and amateurish. And again, like flashbacks, it's the same thing with dream sequences. Yes, it can work, and sometimes like in Leon Uris's Exodus, an excellent novel, which I highly recommend, and I'm long overdue to read, particularly with what's happening now. The flashbacks about the Ben Canaan brothers and Karen and Dov, their pasts in Europe, and their like early days of coming to Eretz Yisrael for the Ben Canaan brothers. They're beyond flashbacks. They actually important parts of the narrative. So they're like, chapter upon chapter upon chapter. It's an actual like serious part of the story. It transcends flashback, and so I guess it could be more like a non-linear narrative. But unless you're doing it in a special case like that, and you're just, oh, I'm just flashing back randomly to something that happened 10 years ago, and here's another flashback and another, you're not doing it because it actually makes narrative sense. And again, like info dumpy tangents, like for example, oh, I'm gonna talk about the weather of this like city in great detail, and oh, and here's the town history, and this is what the local nature and the flora and the fauna are like, and here information about a couple of local bigwigs, like the principal of the school, or the local mayor, the governor, the family of the head football star and the cheerleader at a high school, or a local museum or stuff like that. Maybe that would be good in a little book of notes for like the world building and stuff to keep in mind as necessary to insert, or just have in the back of your mind. Or maybe you could just incorporate like relevant parts of that into different books in the series, or just use as necessary. But just like writing info dump just to fill up space, like seriously, that's another bad habit. And point of view switching is another big one. Like I almost always do. I'm third person omniscient, and even when my books are like a lot closer to like only like 1 or 2 main characters, I still do write like third person omniscient for all intents and purposes, but like point of view switching is like, oh, I'm going to bop back and forth between all these characters. Oh, chapter 1 is in names point, and this is in name 2 and name 3, instead of just like naturally weaving in and out, or just like, oh, I'm gonna, or sometimes it's even more lazy than that, or I'm gonna do like the exact same events for like 5, 10 chapters, but each one is in a different character's point of view. That's even worse than just, oh, bop back and forth because, oh, I don't know how to write third person omniscient. I think you can only be in one single character's head at one time, and I don't know how to like incorporate any other kind of storytelling. So just, think about the writing habits you're inculcating in yourself and like what you don't want to encourage, and I think you'll have a much better nano. Even if you don't get to 50K, sometimes it's okay to fail, or just like realize, well, I need to step my game up and maybe I'll do so much better next year. Thank you very much for watching. If you'd like, let me know down in the comments below what's the worst tip anyone has ever suggested to you for bulking up NaNoWriMo quickly, or if you have ever in the past, fallen prey and succumb to these tips, like, oh, like always call a character by the full name and do like describe everything in minute detail over and over again, instead of just, actually writing what the story needs to be, and like learning how to write but through trial and error that way. And if you haven't already, please consider subscribing, and thank you guys very much for watching all the way to the end, and I will see you soon. I do have another future Preptober video coming up about the project which I'm working on for NaNo this year, so thanks for watching again. Bye.